Society?
Strangers. Strangers in society.
Strangers on the internet?
The secret.
Strangers?
Society, oh, welcome, stranger.
Secret for society?
Welcome back to the Secret Society of Strangers podcast. I'm Lee. I'm here with my co-host Josh.
What's up?
We have very special guests today, authors of Who They Are and What They're Up to, Leslie and Stephen Shaw. And I also know you recently started doing presentations. If you guys want to talk a little bit about that later too, I'm interested in that. But if you guys want to introduce yourselves and just get right into your stuff, we're all ears.
Hi, I'm Leslie Shaw. I've been a journalist for the last 20-ish years or so. I'm part-time now, and I do copy editing and page layout still for the newspaper. And Stephen and I wrote this book together, but I did like the lion's share of the writing, but he has more of the science background, so and also a lot more of the personal experiences himself.
Correct.
Stephen, tell them about yourself.
Well, yes, I grew up in a family that was from post-war World War II England. My parents grew up in northern England, Manchester and Oldham, as children.
And he's a retired acupuncturist, and he was a Tai Chi master for 23 years.
Well, I taught Tai Chi, yes, definitely. And I studied other martial arts too, but I've been a musician for the vast majority of my life and a cabinet maker. I also served 6 years in the military and in the Navy from 1980 to 1986. And, I've been both a blue hat and a white hat, as you might say, so I've kind of been around. So anyways, I grew up in a family that I was told from about the age of 3 that we had this family spirit guide called Oglegli. That's Oglegli, okay? Apparently it means my friend in Tunisian, which I didn't know at the time. But this character would show up, from time to time and help people out in the family bloodline. And I didn't know at the time of being 3 that, this was going back for 4 generations, back from Germany to England, and then it followed us all the way to both northern and southern California. So anyways, I my first memories were when I was 3 years old. I would be visited from time to time by this 2-footed entity that would jump on my chest and my stomach in the middle of the night when I was a child, and kind of playfully.
But it was invisible.
Invisible. I couldn't see it. It definitely wasn't a cat. It wasn't a human being, that's for sure. And I just thought, this is Oglegli, or some such thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, about the time I was 9 years old, I had started sleeping in a bunk bed on the top of the bunk, and my brother, who was 6 years younger than me, was on the bottom of the bunk. And there was this one night in particular where I was awakened by these sounds that I just didn't recognize at all. They were strange, and I knew it wasn't the dog, because it was a totally different sound. So I crept out of my my bunk bed and started walking down the hallway. It was dimly lit, and my heart was racing because I was kind of scared.
Mm-hmm.
And my pulse was up, and my respiration was up, and I was did not know what I was going to see. And before I got to the living room, I just black out. And at that point, I have no memory. All I remember is that I'm, maybe several hours, whatever, I'm back in my bunk bed and have no memory. In between that time, about the age of 8, I remember seeing, and a lot of people think it's kind of weird, but I remember seeing these like little gnomes, like garden gnomes, like you'd see like about 2 foot tall.
Yeah.
That were like walking into my bedroom, and they were kind of shimmery in their appearance. There was like 4 or 5 of them, and they looked they were all male that I could tell, and I was scared, so I turned around and I just basically tried to ignore them. Now, the interesting thing is that when my brother turned about my age, when he turned about 8 or 9 years old, he started sleeping in our closet in the bedroom. And he did that for 2 full years.
Oh, wow.
And I asked my brother, Philip, I said, Philip, why are you sleeping in the closet? He said, well, I'm afraid of the little men that come at night.
Oh, so he could see the little men too.
I believed him because I had seen them myself. So am I going to disbelieve my little brother seeing the same thing that I saw? Right. So anyway, this is the type of thing that you don't talk about with your friends at school. If
Even
you talk about stuff like that, they
yeah.
say one of 3 things: that you're either like, you're in a haunted house, or you're lying, or you're nuts, okay, or you're telling lies or something like that. So we kept this type of stuff in the family. Right. But this is a thing that this old Blakely character, this spirit guide, had shown up through multiple generations, and it helped people, even saved people's lives. Okay, so anyways, by about the time when I was 11, I saw my first UFO. Okay, this is in Woodland Hills, California, in, let's say, 1971. It was about 9:30 at night, and I just happened to be walking by the front door, and I saw this large orange globe that was moving from south to north in a horizontal pattern, kind of stopped for a little bit and then kept on going. And I thought, well, that's not a plane. It's not blinking. It's just, this big orange, cylinder. I mean, a globe. Okay. So anyway, I called Griffiths Park Observatory the next day, and they said, well, young man, we don't have our telescopes, pointed in that direction. So, but thanks for letting us know. And during this time period, there actually were a fair amount of UFO sightings in the San Fernando Valley, in which I was living at the time. So it was like one of these things I found out later. Okay, so anyway, the really interesting thing started to happen when I was 18 years old. This was mid-January of 1979. So it was, wintertime. So anyways, the first thing that happened was that, by the way, my dad and I were cabinet makers. My dad was a master cabinet maker, and I was just learning, okay? So anyway, the first night, apparently my dad's doors opened and closed, his closet doors opened and closed on him, like in the middle of the night. And
by themselves.
By themselves. And he told me this at breakfast time, and I kind of thought it was kind of funny, honestly, at the time. I just, said, okay, Dad, you had a great dream, right?
Just kind of shrugged,
So anyways, to go back a little bit, at that time I started studying Tai Chi, and I was also very much into Paramahansa Yogananda's work, his autobiography of a yogi and his metaphysical meditation. So anyways, I gave my dad this little booklet of Paramahansa's stuff. I said, Dad, you should really read this stuff. It's really interesting. So I gave it to him, and this is about 9 o'clock at night. About a half an hour later, he came into my bedroom with this puzzled face, puzzled expression. This guy had been a bobby, basically a cop in England from 1952 to 1956. And he was in the military too before that. So he was a no-nonsense guy. So he looked at me and said, Stephen, I'm hearing silver bells. I said, okay, Dad. I been a musician since I was 7. So I said, okay. All right. So I walked into the living room, and sure enough, there was this bing, 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 a silver bell being, rung. Right. But it was coming from inside the 2x4 wall of the fireplace. And, resonance doesn't work. If you're in like a enclosed, area, it just doesn't. So my dad and I just like looked at each other. We looked up the flue and we banged on the wall and said, well, let's get Karen, my sister, who was 5 years younger than me, and wanted to have she was kind of like, didn't want to have anything to do with this kind of stuff, right? So we got her to come into the living room, and she said, where's that bell coming from? And sure enough, she heard it too. And we banged on the wall and we looked at the flue again and went on for a good 10, maybe 15 minutes, and then it stopped. Now, at that time, my dad, my brother, and I, we were building a second house up in Sonora, California, which is 350 miles north. And, my brother was going to school up there. He was about 12 at the time, and my mom was taking care of the place. We were only halfway built, right? But we would always call each other in the morning, right? So my mom said, Jeffrey, my dad, said, Jeffrey, the weirdest thing happened last night. I was drifting off, and then I heard this bell, and I thought it was the phone. It was sounded like a bell that was ringing, so I picked up the phone, and a voice on the other line said something to the effect of, I am the invisible Beachy, or something like that. It could have been O'Glegley or something like that, something similar. So I got my brother on the phone after that. My brother said, Stephen, the phone didn't ring that I heard, but she did pick up the phone, and she swears that she talked to this voice. By the way, my mom was an automatic writer. All the women in the family were going back to
4 generations.
Were automatic writers. So, I mean, I'd heard things from my mom that there's no way she could have known were true, but that were, so I knew that it was true. So anyways, the next night, things were getting kind of weird already, right? So next night, I'm in my bed, not on the top of the bunk, but the bottom of the bunk, and I'm awakened by this whizzing sound, this whoosh, whoosh. And I just kind of roll over and I kind of look down the hallway. There's like a dim light on because there's the little dim light in the kitchen. Right? So well, maybe I'm hearing things or something, or a dream. So I try and go back to sleep, and then 2 pushes from the base of the bed, 2 very distinct, gentle pushes, just like somebody's pushing it. And I'm thinking, well, it is Southern California. Maybe it's like an earthquake or something. So I've lived through a couple of earthquakes at that point, so I was trying to make logical sense of it. And then, as I try and go back to sleep again, a little stronger, 2 pushes. And at this point, I'm getting a little worried. And then 2 stronger pushes. And now I'm getting irritated and scared. I'm thinking, is somebody playing a trick on me, or what the hell is going on? And then I get 3 distinct taps on my right deltoid, mid-deltoid, like an index finger is saying 1, 2, 3, trying to get my attention. At this point, I just roll over and onto my right side and say, what? And what I get is I see this shimmery object. I can't really tell what it is, and then I black out. Okay. I told my dad in the morning, and my dad and I didn't know what to think of it. So think of it as the next night I said, I'm not going to sleep in that same bedroom.
It's even weirder.
I'm just not going to sleep in that same bedroom. No. So I decided to wear my work clothes from the day before, my cabinet maker's work clothes, and I sleep on the couch in the living room. So I woke up about 5:30 in the morning. This is January in 1979 in Southern California, so it's dark. So I look at my upright piano, thinking about what music I'm going to play that day, because I am a very good pianist and accordionist. So, anyways, I was listening to the little fountain in the other room. So I was awake, laying on my back, and I was, not in any type of sleep paralysis or anything like that. And this entity from the front door, tall, skinny, blue-white light entity, about 6.5 feet tall, maybe taller, came floating, walking towards me, The 25 feet probably covered it in about a second and a half to two, and stopped by my right-hand side, bringing with it, the whole room was filled with blue-white light. Stopped by my right-hand side, bent down to my right ear. The whole right side of my body became numb or paralyzed, not in a scary way, but in a way where I could not even close my right eye. My right eye was already open, but I couldn't close it. And so I'm thinking in my head, an 18-year-old head, I'm thinking, I'm going to see old Glegley. I'm going to see the family spirit guide that has helped people. But the other half of me is saying, dude, you're paralyzed. You can't move. You can't do anything. And so when it bent down to me, it said into my ear, not in my head, but into my ear, it said, "Hi, Steve." Basically as a whisper, okay? So I couldn't tell whether it was male or female, but there was like this 50-50 blend of excitement and fear. And then I guess for whatever reason, after 5 or 10 seconds, he decided maybe that I wasn't ready to whatever, and it left. And then I black out. I told my dad at breakfast, and I told my sister, and they didn't know what the hell to think, right? The only thing I can tell you, which is an absolute truth, which nobody's been able to explain to me before, is at 11:30 in the morning, I was getting hungry. My dad and I were cabinet makers, and we were just, 11:30, you're getting hungry as workmen, right?
So about 6 hours later.
Yeah, 6 hours later, exactly. 6 hours later, I decide I'm going to go down to Jack in the Box to get some food, right? So I reached into my right-hand side pocket and pulled out the coins and the, whatever money I had, right? Put the coins on the table, and swear to God, all the coins were magnetized, or they had been exposed to something that I don't know what it was. My dad could pick up the coins by the edge, by the face. It did not matter. Did not matter at all. And we were just looked at each other and said, well, this is not possible. American coins are not magnetic. Okay.
Right.
And nobody's been able to explain that to me since then. I've tried to repeat the experiment myself. So anyways, the last night, I'm already kind of freaked out. I don't know what is going on. So I decided.
Understandable.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I'd be terrified.
I got, so what I did, I said, you know what? It doesn't matter where I sleep. So I just went to bed back in my bedroom, right? So anyways, my dad, having been a cop, whatever, he was awakened again in the middle of the night, which is typical, right? And he sees this wall of blue-white light just enveloping,
like flooding out of his room,
out of my bedroom. Okay.
Oh, out of your room. Okay.
Out of my room, right? And so he said, well, basically, he's like, what's all this then type of attitude?
Like a cop.
I'm gonna find out like what is going on, because it wasn't making sense. So he was getting out of bed, and then this voice, this time it was in his head, said, Jeffrey, just go back to sleep. Nothing to worry about here. Everything's fine. Stephen's fine. Yada yada. And then he went back to sleep. And I have no memory of that whatsoever.
We think that they have a consciousness dampening field somehow, because a lot of times these people describe their abductions as this blacking out thing, and this happens a lot in the family. And the more research we did, we realized this is the signature for the alien abduction phenomenon.
For us, yes.
They have the way of dampening people's consciousness. Because, a cop wouldn't just go back to sleep. Because a voice in his brain told him to go back to sleep, right?
There's some kind of like overlay, dulling everything to make you susceptible to their suggestions.
I think so. And so, because he's halfway out of bed, it's like, okay, I'll just believe this voice in my head.
You should tell about Philip's experiences.
A parent, too, or a cop would be, what's that going on in my child's room?
Yeah, like I'm going to get in there at all costs, and then all of a sudden you're like,
my dad and I were dad and I were best friends, and exactly, he was, we were buddies, so there was no question he was going to investigate.
And a lot of times they describe becoming unconscious even when they're terrified.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
or their
When
their
your
heart
blood-
is pounding.
When your adrenal system is like
Yeah.
pumping and you're really scared, you don't just go to sleep unless like something.
Yeah, they didn't just roll over and go to sleep.
No,
So
yeah,
tell about Phillips.
Philip,
my
yeah.
brother,
These things tend to come in clusters, and Philip, his brother, had another cluster of 3 things that happened. He woke up. This is the Sonora house up mid Central California.
The one that we were building.
Very nice
Yes, okay.
woodsy house, and his bedroom window. There was a drop off down to a creek, and then across was a mountain, fully forested mountain. So there was nothing back there, no houses or roads or anything. And he saw it in the middle of the night. He awoke to these 2 bright white lights shining into his bedroom window. And he's sitting up in bed trying to figure out what they are for a second, and then blacks out.
This is 1982, and he was 16, by the way.
So just a few years after this other cluster that Stevens had. And then the next night, he's laying in bed again, and he hears a scrabbling sound that he thinks is one of his cats. So he reaches down to pet what he thinks is a cat, and instead a hand grabs his wrist. And he feels this thrill of fear and adrenaline.
Adrenaline, right.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But then still blacks out.
Mhm.
And then the third night, he saw a tall, skinny, gray alien standing in his bedroom doorway, and they stared at each other for a few seconds, and then again he blacks out. So, a lot of these phenomena, we were not really sure what we were dealing with exactly, but once we started comparing notes with the whole family, this is the first time that one of them saw what they're dealing with. The tall grays.
Yeah, the commonality is like the Old Blakely character who saved my uncle's life in Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, back post World War II. Always appears. Every single person who's seen this entity is always tall and skinny, about 6.5 feet tall. Sometimes black, sometimes for me blue-white. Sometimes it's actually as a gray.
Yeah.
So what we know, our handlers or our cousins, as we call them,
Yes.
what is going on? This Old Blakely character is actually really an entity that is, which is a gray.
These grays.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're assigned to your family. Like
right. They're what do you call them? We call them handlers.
I call them handlers. Yeah. Because as we started researching the abduction phenomenon, we discovered that it's the theories at the time were that they're just curious. They're taking cross sampling of humanity to for scientific reasons, scientific
research
purposes.
And development. Yes.
But what we found instead was that it tends to be in families. A person, it meets their certain criteria of whatever they're after exactly. We have some ideas, but it's still hard to know exactly what. But as soon as they find somebody who meets this criteria, they'll take that person again and again and again through their lives, and then start taking their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It's like they're after a specific DNA strand.
Yeah,
and and once they find it, they assign like a handler to the family, and that handler actually protects family members as well. It's like a prize cow. Like I make the analogy like a farmer protecting his prize cow because he needs the milk out of it.
My Uncle Douglas would definitely not be alive if it weren't for Old Blakely.
Or maybe not alive.
He wouldn't. He was. In fact, I'll tell you a story really quickly.
Yeah,
please.
Sure. My Uncle Douglas, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, he told me this story when I was about 16 years old. Maybe 15, 16.
And again,
he
later,
said that he was a pilot in the Royal Air Force right after World War II, and in fact, he knew how to fly a plane before he knew how to drive a car. So anyway, he was stationed with his billet in Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, and he knew about the story about Old Blakely. He had heard about it, from my mother's,
the family,
from the family kind of stuff. So anyways, he was awakened in the middle of the night when he was like on his cot in a multi-man tent, and by this, again, tall, skinny, dark figure that woke him up and said, "Douglas, you need to get out right now. you are going to be killed if you don't leave right now. And he knew about Old Gledley, so he didn't, and then he got up out of his cot, and then the figure was just gone. Okay, so he got out of the tent, and sure enough, about a minute later, a raiding party came through with machetes and with guns and killed several of the pilots and the officers. And he told me the story a couple times, and I had no reason not to believe him because my aunt also believed him, my dad believed him. So anyways, to make a long story short, he had one daughter, and when his daughter turned the age to be able to drive, he bought her a Triumph, an old, basically, British car. And guess what the license plate was?
What?
Old Gledley.
No way.
Way.
I'm not kidding.
Vanity
I am
plate.
not kidding you. And this guy became very, very wealthy. He became very wealthy.
Wow.
And he just, it was just one of these things. It's just like one of these things that I heard this stuff. I heard it from my mom. I'd seen direct evidence from my mom of stuff that she knew from automatic writing. As an example, when I was 9 years old, she picked me up from elementary school, and she was absolutely just bawling in tears. And I said, "Mommy, what's wrong?" She said, "My mom just died." I said, well, how do you know that? I said, I was contacted by automatic writing. Old Gledley contacted me and told me that my mom had fallen down some cobblestone steps and died. And she told my dad was working at Landy Wood Products at the time, and when he came home, he believed her, but he didn't 100% believe her because we hadn't had a phone call. This was 1969, okay? So it was like the old style phone. So about a day later, we got a phone call.
Official word
that her mom had actually died the day before. And this happened 3 times.
Yeah, she did it with his father and then Uncle Clifford, too.
Uncle Clifford, yes. This is
she
stuff
was contacted by automatic
this
writing.
is not unusual. See, I grew up in a, most people consider it to be really weird, but I always consider it to be kind of like, this is something that is special or different.
Oh,
and I
very
certainly
special.
I didn't tell my friends. You don't tell your friends. They think that either you're lying or you're weird or you're in a haunted house or
even the
something
family,
like that.
Even the family themselves were reticent to talk with each other. It took a while to kind of pull the stories out of everybody, when we started.
They're real things.
Comparing notes,
Leslie finally saw her first UFO.
Oh, yes.
That's when she finally believed me.
Yeah, it was in 2005, and he had all this stuff happen to him his whole life, and by this time he had already seen 3 UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of was wishing something would happen to me. And
Tell me about it.
Yeah, I know, right? And then finally one day there it was. We were driving home in Joshua Tree, Joshua Tree is supposed to be a hotbed of UFO activity, and I can testify to it ourselves. And we're driving home at night. I'm driving, and through the windshield, I can see a white light in the sky in front of us. And it's round and very bright, and it's about twice the size of Venus.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I thought, well, maybe it's a plane flying into Palm Springs Airport, but then it wasn't behaving like a plane. It didn't have the little runny blinky lights, on it, and it
wasn't moving the same way.
It wasn't moving like a plane. It was just kind of hovering there. And then we were driving towards it, and so it was getting brighter and brighter. I'm not sure if it was hovering or if we were both coming towards each other.
Yeah, we're in Highway 62, going about 70 roughly.
And then it got brighter and brighter till it was about half as bright as the moon, and then it took off north. It was so fast, it streaked out into a line visually, and the line collapsed for me. And it was less than a quarter of a second. This thing was over the horizon and gone. Had to be 20,000 miles an hour when I guess a speed. It's like that, And a white light in the sky could be many different things, but if it takes off at that speed, at full speed instantly too, it didn't ramp up to that speed.
Yeah, no, it was just hovering.
Yeah.
And then it
Right, exactly.
Just poof,
There's
gone.
nothing that we have that does that.
Yeah, we don't have one of those. So.
and I actually saw one of the UFOs I saw was off the coast of Malibu.
It was a USO.
This is a USO.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This was This is in October of 2004.
04, I believe, yeah.
Yes, I was eating at the Chart House, which is a famous seafood restaurant. There, I was still an acupuncturist at the time.
Right on the coast of Malibu.
So anyway, I was watching the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees, and the playoffs. So I know that. Okay. So anyways, it's about 9 o'clock at night again, and I asked the valet to go get my car for me, and he got my car, and then we both, the valet and I, see this USO come up out of the water. This is off of the coast of Malibu, maybe about 1 or 2 miles off the coast, and it comes up again. It's a disc, and it's white, and it kind of hovers there, and then it does some crazy maneuvers, and it shoots off to the north. And I looked at the valet, and he looked at me and said, "Did you see that?" I said, "Oh yeah, I saw that." So yeah, so that was the one UFO
too,
that I had seen. It's amazing. I found out later that I did not know at the time that area was a hot spot for UFOs. In fact, I didn't even start doing I started doing my research when I first read Admiral Byrd's diary back in 1992. I was luckily enough, one of my offices where I was working as an acupuncturist, I was in a metaphysical bookstore, and the first copy came out of Admiral Byrd's secret diary, and that's when I really started to get really curious. Like, things were not making sense to me.
Yeah.
It just seems like there's something more going on than just, a family spirit guide. Why are they like, what's going on with the cattle mutilations? What's going on with all these people being,
So about 20 years ago, we start our research in earnest, and we discover that the theory that these things are coming from distant star systems, this theory just wasn't aligning with the facts.
Right.
They're seen 10,000 times a year worldwide every year.
Yeah, reported.
And that's reported sightings. And we think they're only reporting it like 10%. So really, they're being seen 100,000 times a year. Just the numbers alone point to the not being from these crazy distances, right?
It's a means, opportunity, and motive. It's the mom theory too. Like, what is their motive? For being
for
so
coming
interested.
these huge distances, right? And then so much of the UFO data I was looking at was them coming up. They're up out of a lake, up out of the ocean, up out of a volcano, up out of a mountain, a ridge, a mesa, out of the side of a mountain sometimes, where a hole will open up and they're flying in and out. So the Admiral Byrd story, his diaries, talks about meeting with a population of humans that live under the ice sheet of Antarctica, right?
The REI.
And a lot of stuff points to that being maybe true, right? Because first of all, we have an enormous military no-fly zone over Antarctica. Why? Who cares if we fly over this barren wasteland of ice, right?
And we became very interested in it post World War II.
Exactly.
Yeah, like, what do you think we're gonna see up there? You know what I mean?
Right. So Admiral Byrd, there was a second incident that came to light through a Russian intelligence report where Admiral Byrd in February of 1947, he was attacked. His fleet of ships, an armada, was sent down there to destroy this Nazi base that we surmised Hitler had built down there, right? And so they're going down there to destroy it. And instead, this fleet of flying saucers emerges up out of the ocean and attacks the armada. It sinks a destroyer and downs half his aircraft, Admiral Byrd's carrier-based aircraft, and killed dozens of men, and then retreated. They left back into the ocean. And we think that this really did happen, and that then Admiral Byrd took his plane and flew into have a private meeting with the people that just kicked our ass,
Yeah.
Granted, at the time too, it was it's like, okay, we got to make some type of contact here. They already knew something was like, this was not like just the the Nazis. So
When you wouldn't want to be Admiral Byrd returning to Washington with that report, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, a bunch of flying saucers kicked our ass, and we know nothing about them. So we just,
and the reason why we believe him is because of the report that he did, the interview we did in was it Buenos?
Argentine press,
Argentina, yeah, the Argentina basically said that we have an enemy, we have a foe that can fly in
from
almost
pole
no
to
time,
pole,
from pole to pole in a very short period of time.
almost instantly. Yeah,
So
so he and then he got back to Washington and was debriefed and of course muzzled by Washington, and he never spoke about it again in his whole life, except that this posthumously published diary was found amongst his personal effects by his son. So we feel confident that it's real.
And the Russians, of course, they did their thing. There's not a lot of reason to trust the Russians, but there's also not a lot of reason for them to make something like this up. There's like
I trust their interests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So Admiral Byrd, this Armada had a 6-month operation. It was Operation High Jump, and it was supposed to last 6 months. But one thing we do know for sure is that they canceled it in 2 months in retreat. They just bailed and went right back to South America, and that's where Admiral Byrd was quoted saying what he said in the press, and then went back to Washington. So once we applied the Admiral Byrd stories to our UFO data, everything started to click. For instance, it makes sense now why we see them 10,000 times a year, because they live here, and
They're already here.
Right, and
they're already here, yeah.
And why we have have evidence of their activities going back thousands of years. They've been here thousands of years, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then most of the abductees are Caucasian.
Yeah, which is interesting in itself.
And it made no sense. Why we only make up 16% of the population? Why so much interest in Caucasian DNA specifically, right?
Mm-hmm. But you guys have a few correlations to the DNA.
Yeah.
That I was reading. That's pretty interesting. If you guys want to get into that.
The hair of the alien thing, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, that was fascinating.
Well, that's one of them. Yes.
There's one little. So what we think these people are is a breakaway civilization of humanity, and we have
about
a theory.
13,000 years ago.
Yeah, we have a theory as to why they broke away, and that's because we tie it to the Younger Dryas comet impact of 12,850 years ago. Mm-hmm. This is the thing that caused the mammoths to become extinct and the mastodons.
Yeah, these are hard facts, hard scientific facts that we can actually quote.
Super interested in the Younger Dryas like that.
Oh yeah.
When I learned about that, again, like you said, it kind of unlocks a lot and links a lot of these things that are either in other cultures as myths and lore, or
1,000 flood myths, in the ancient lore. Exactly.
1,200, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, there's over 1,000 of them, and that's one of the things I brought to the relationship is I have a degree in animation, but my minor was in ancient art history, and I started studying Fraser's book. Fraser's this guy in the 17th century who hunted up 500 separate flood myths worldwide, that had a flood myth in their most ancient lore. And since that time, only more have been found, like 1,200 of them have been found. So they 3 decades ago, they discovered nanodiamonds in 13,000-year-old soil, proving that it was a celestial impact that caused it. And nobody could find the crater because it was a comet. So don't punch huge craters.
It was an airburst around what we now know as the Lake Superior area, which was Lake Agassiz, I think, at the time.
But the detonation was enormous still, and it caused worldwide tsunamis and
forest fires too.
We think it caused a lithospheric shift as well. We think the mammoths prove it. The mammoths were frozen standing up with food still in their mouths, right? So obviously they were hit by
flash freeze.
Yeah, like an enormous
Yeah.
sleet storm that was moving at hundreds of miles an hour, right?
1,000, maybe 1,000.
Even then.
Yeah.
We don't know for a fact, but we do know that they've been found. That
And they're found in an Arctic zone. And
what is currently an Arctic zone.
and they could, even back then, even 13,000 years ago, they couldn't have survived at that latitude. So I think this proves the lithospheric shift theory, that it just hit, with such an enormous impact that it caused our crust to slip on on the mantle.
Yeah, there's a bit of disinformation that's out there too, as far as like the 90-foot fruit trees. It turns out that
They're alder trees.
They were alders, and were probably about 20 foot tall.
But they still bear some sort of a fruit for seeds,
they still have
and they had it on them. Yeah.
Right. So yes, there's a little bit of controversy there. But what we do know is that they were found, and in the same
flash
soil,
frozen as well.
and also like there's also to the camels that were found, and the rhinoceri,
all pointing to temperate zones, grasslands.
Yeah,
You have to have enormous grasslands
Massive, yeah, because those animals are gigantic.
to support those animals' appetites. Yeah, I would have to.
I have actually stood within 5 feet when I was in Kenya in 1994. I stood within 5 feet of a white rhino, and this was not in the cage. This was out on the Masai Mara, and the Masai Mara they had M16s, and they told me very directly, said, if you touch this or try and touch the horn, we will shoot you. And I actually have pictures of myself
standing next to it, looking nervous,
my hands behind my back,
nervous for multiple reasons.
You have no idea until you stand next to a force of nature like that.
How big they are.
The female was in rutting, and the male was like in what he was doing.
None of you should have been around that thing.
I should show it to you sometime. I'll pull it up and show it to you sometime.
Absolutely.
It's like this is like a force of nature.
Wild.
You do not even know until you actually are there. It's like, oh my God. And now they're almost extinct.
Yeah.
The white rhinos. It's anyways, that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
So we think this impact was so powerful that it actually caused this lithospheric shift. And we think, because Hapgood, the guy who came up with the lithospheric shift theory, he puts the last one at between 12,000 and 18,000 years ago, and the impact is bam right in that time zone, time frame.
12,850.
Right. And so before the North Pole was actually in the East Hudson Bay. And then 50,000 years before that, it was in Greenland. And then 100,000 years before that, it was in the Bering Sea, proving that these shifts do happen. And the last one was, we think, caused by that.
One of the most important things that because I studied I was actually basically geology was like my minor, in a sense. So one thing we find out as far as like when lava is laid down, the magnetic particles like the irons and whatnot, the particles, whenever you lay down new magma, those particles automatically, 100% of the time, they point towards what is the magnetic north at that time. So you can also date where the magnetic north was due to knowing when the lava was laid down. The magma was laid down, cooled down the lava. So so we know, not just because of the theory about the lithospheric shift and the Uccello horizon and the Younger Dryas boundary, but we also know too because of when the magma cooled to be lava. So we have all these things, and of course the nanodiamonds. So we can track it. So we actually know that this thing actually happened. And there was. And
it's been confirmed. The Younger Dryas comet impact area has been dated to 12,850 years ago.
Yes.
In our book, we say we thought it was the Hiawatha crater, which was found in northern Greenland, very close by, right? And relatively close by. And it says so in our book. Unfortunately, that was wrong, and it's come out since then. And of course, we'll make that correction in a future editions. But so I apologize to our readers out there. if you're reading the book and you read the word Hiawatha, swap it out in your mind for the Younger Dryas comet instead.
It's still Colonel Mustard with a knife, except it's Colonel Mustard with a knife, not in the kitchen, but in the dining room. So it's still the same thing. So
the same things happened. The same occurrence. The mammoths were killed. And so on. And we think that prior to this, that the human race was more advanced than we give them credit for.
Yes, for sure.
And that somebody on this planet discovered that the comet was coming, because almost all these flood myths start the same way, where somebody warns them that there's a catastrophe is coming.
Yeah,
right.
So someone sitting on the planet goes, "Oh crap, we're about to be hit by an extinction level event." A 40,000 mile an hour colossal dirty snowball.
Right, exactly.
How many miles wide? 62 miles wide.
Yeah, 100 kilometers or 62 miles wide. That's correct.
So we think that then they warned everybody around the planet, who then either built an ark or went to high ground, or sometimes were warned to dig underground too.
Like Darinkuyu.
Yeah, Darinkuyu and the story about King Yima, who his god Ahura Mazda told him a winter like no other was coming. And they didn't warn him about a flood. They warned him about the 150 long year winter. And I think it's because they were on the top of the Anatolian plateau, which is high enough and far enough inland where it would have been safe from the tsunami line.
4,000 foot elevation, about 200 miles.
Jesus.
Right. And see, that's I think why a lot of times aliens are spotted flying their UFOs in and out of volcanoes. Seems like volcanoes are a popular spot, right? And I think that's a really intelligent place to move a large population to survive a extinction level event. Because, first of all, they have this throat that goes almost down to the crust, right? Or in some cases, all the way to the crust, through the crust.
10 to 20 miles. Yeah.
And off of volcanoes, you have these enormous lava tubes that sometimes open into huge caverns, right? So you've got a built-in underground bunker that's high enough ground where it'll be above the tsunami line. And, you can move people in quickly to it and trick it out to where you have power, because it's geothermal power inside volcanoes.
Yeah.
And once you have power, you can survive a cataclysm like a great flood.
Yeah, one of the things we found in our book and our research was just how frequently these extinction level events have happened in the near past. I mean, it's just not that uncommon for these things to happen.
So we think they may have had this underground bunker idea centuries for thousands of years prior to this.
Yeah.
And it's just like humans to argue amongst each other about what the best solution is. Some of us are going to go up, some of us are going to go down.
Yeah.
Yeah, to the dark side of the moon or whatever. It doesn't matter.
And the warnings were different depending on the topography of where the people were. Like in the Andes, they told them to go to high ground because they have plenty of high ground, right? Yeah. But other places, you've got to build a boat because they don't have a high ground there, or you got to make an ark and take all your animals aboard, So we think that the human race splintered because of this, and there were a lot of these underground arks sunk inside our planet for people to survive the cataclysm that was coming. And so that's who we think is flying these UFOs in our skies. They are us. That's why they're indistinguishable from us. The Nordic aliens, they look just like tall Swedish people, right? And to me, gray aliens, when I see a gray in my mind's eye, I see a human being that's been underground for 13,000 years.
Yep.
I love that.
So they change
bigger eyes, right? Blacker eyes, no hair, very pale, right?
Pale skin, yep.
And anyway, so that's kind of like you've got the theory there.
You must have some questions
at this point.
Oh yeah.
To go back to your family, Stephen, I find it interesting. So your mother goes back in generations of automatic writing, and you
Yes.
have these sightings. So I almost feel like, and you can tell me what your opinion is on this, is that they amplify your already given gifts. So your mother may not have the visual ability to come in contact with these things, but she's way more in touch with them somehow mentally, that they feel comfortable that they communicate with her. As for you, they manifest physically to show you themselves.
Well, her mother had seen Old Leslie.
And they had plenty of manifestations of their own.
They
Yeah.
did too. Okay.
My mom had the visuals.
Remember that she was attacked by that monster? In
Oh
the,
yeah,
the
there's
room?
Fascinating.
There's,
It's all
there's
fascinating.
many things that I don't really want to go into, but I could. I mean, that were just.
Well, tell them about that at least, since I brought it
about
up.
the imp.
The imp, yeah, this creature that attacked his mother.
This happened again around about the same time when my brother had seen the tall gray, which we didn't even find. Leslie and I didn't even find out about that until
years later. Yeah,
years later when we actually sat down and talked to my
compared notes.
Because he was at that point he was my brother was a very intelligent man, very intelligent. He taught calculus for fun, for extra money at college level. He was also a draftsman and engineer, so he was a force of nature. About 6'3" feet tall. He was a force of nature. So, anyways, there was this time when my mom and my sister and my brother, they were all, my sister and brother were going to school up in Sonora, California. This was around 1982, 1983. And it was like they were in high school, basically. And they were all feeling sick. And my mom, having grown up in England and was kind of, she kind of kept to herself, and she was not a person for lying at all, for making stuff up. She would barely talk to you unless you really had to, right? So anyways, so she got out of bed this one afternoon. She's taking an afternoon nap, got out of bed, and she was attacked by this black entity. She called it an imp that jumped on her back and was saying these like garbled, like whatever sounds, and was biting her and
scratching at her neck.
And she said, "Get off me, leave me alone."
And she said it was hideously ugly,
Yeah, she was able to fight it off, but she actually had a bite, which turned into what's called a scrofula, not a goiter. The scrofula is different. It's basically like if you get bitten by a cat. So it's like this
like a subdermal infection that never goes away.
And of course, she went to the doctor. And the doctor said, "Well, you must call it cat scratch fever." I said, "No." So anyway, so this.
But she didn't mention the crazy monster that attacked her.
Right.
But anyways, after she was able to fight this thing off, my sister still remembers this. She remembers it very vividly, and she said, "Yes, we were all very sick at the time, and once Mom was able to fight this thing off, that they all started getting healthier
They
again.
all felt better, yeah.
So it was like one of these things. But this scrofula, it never went away.
Yeah, it was with her till her dying day.
My mom ended up developing Parkinson's and then severe arthritis, and had a very, very horrible last 10 years of her life.
His brother Philip was her primary caretaker, and
after my dad died, when he shouldn't have died, then my brother kind of went a little insane. He was taking care of my mom, and on his 51st birthday, he took a shotgun and first he killed his two cats, then he blew my mom's head off, then he blew his own head off in 2017.
Yeah, that was a bad year for us.
It was beyond horrible.
Yeah.
I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
He's a brilliant man, but he was never emotionally, I don't want to say abnormal, but it was kind of like that. He never had a long-term relationship. He had very, very, very few friends. He was kind of hermit-like and eventually very miserly-like in his later years. And I think I put a lot of this at the door lay it at the door of these early traumas, these
Seeing the little man.
seeing the little man, and being
Yeah.
abducted by these creatures.
And then the orbs that were harassing him.
Oh,
when
yeah,
he
the
had
orbs.
The orbs that it's just like,
he built himself this kind of hermit house in the woods, right? And it had a long deck on it. And he lived in the second story, and the garage and stuff was below, right? And so he described this to me where
a red orb.
Oh yeah, this orb's about this big, about say 5 inches in diameter.
About a softball size.
Was floating up and down his deck, kind of pausing at the windows,
His
like it
second
was
story
peering in the windows, And this happened every night for a few weeks, and he finally got angry, and he said, "I'm going to go out there and confront this stupid orb." And so he got out on the deck, and it was at the other end, and he put his hands on his hip to confront it, and the thing rushed at him and went through his chest and back out his back, And the next day, we were visiting him, and he said, "Yeah, this orb rushed me and went through my back." And I looked on his back where he was pointing. It was up high back, and it was
his right side.
It was a greenish bruise there, like not
a ball,
greenish,
like
but
a ball,
like blackish.
Yeah, like he got hit by a ball or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And my brother was not he was not the type of personality to joke around about that type of stuff.
No, definitely not a joker.
He was literally worried. I mean, my brother was 6'3", 6'3.5", and 280, 300 pounds. So it was like not a person you want to mess with.
No,
he definitely was not. He was not joking about this. And this is when we started This is about when we started to put the pieces together, as far as what was really going on. That it just wasn't making sense.
Yeah.
That it was why would a family spirit guide be going from Germany to England to 2 parts of California over 4 generations? What is their motive?
Right. And it's not a haunting, because hauntings are like at places, right? They don't follow you everywhere you go, generally. But it's like their handler keeps tabs on them, and there's definitely a psychic component to the whole UFO abduction phenomenon. I believe they monitor their abductees through the astral realm, through the dream state. They can kind of keep tabs on you that way, maybe, or something. Because frequently they harass him in the dream state all the time.
Really?
Yeah, it's never ended, really.
It hasn't stopped even to this day.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, what is your contact like these days?
Oh, well, the most recent one was I've had this recurring dream maybe 10, 12 times in my life, maybe for the past 30 years, where I will feel this like hum in my body, and then I will hear this hum. It's always like a and I'll feel this, and then I will be either like on a beach or in my backyard, and I will look up. It's always twilight too. It's always interesting. It's always twilight, which is
like
kind
dreams,
of like the astral realm, right? And I'll look up. I'll see this plane go over at twilight, and then it turns more and more UFO looking until first it turns into like a shuttlecraft, and then it turns into a UFO. But it's a recurring dream, and sometimes the UFO lands, and sometimes a being will get out. This last time, which happened about 9 months ago, I think I wrote the whole thing down. This being got out and was really ticked off at me.
He was mad at him.
Again, tall and skinny, but a little bit more buff than Oak Likely. He said, "I'm going to hit you with like 1 billion somethings, watts or whatever it is." And the funny thing was about this is that Leslie was in the dream, and my sister was, and our friend Tammy, and my mom. And after this happened, and the being went back up and became a UFO again, and then left, I sat down and had this long, intense talk with everybody, saying, "You guys all saw this, right?" I said, "Oh yeah, we saw it." And we're saying, "This is not a dream, right? You saw this, right?" And so I'm asking my mom questions, and I asked Leslie questions, and Tamara, And so we literally sat down at a table, and it was just like we're talking like right now. It might as well just be like we're just having this conversation right now. And I wrote it all down. I could read it to you guys sometime, but it's like, but this is not a one-off. This has happened to me. Well, not the talking part with with everybody, but this is like it starts with like a body hum, feeling the hum in my body,
And
then
actually,
I
a lot of
hear the hum.
witnesses talk about the hum.
We've had other guests
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost describe almost the same thing that you just described, except what they saw in that twilight was a little different.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah,
And,
mine was a UFO that changed. Well,
and they-
plane that changed UFO.
they're describing like that they're silent most of the time. UFOs are usually silent, but when they do make a sound. It's this hum that's more felt than heard.
Mhm.
And actually, that's a sign that you're way too close too, because the people sometimes get electromagnetic radiation burns.
Or too close when they hear the hum.
Yeah, if you're hearing the hum,
Yeah.
you might want to back up.
That's so fascinating. It's
So do you think that these entities or these beings target your family because of like your generational psychic abilities, and that's how like, or that's the DNA sequence that they're trying to chase?
I think that we're probably somewhat related to them. Maybe genetically a bit more than other people are.
Mm-hmm.
Also, too, I mean, I've been very sensitive pretty much my whole life. I mean, I want not to brag, but I am a very good musician. And I was a Tai Chi teacher, which I highly recommend.
And they're
people,
a psychic bunch. The whole family are.
I highly recommend people learn Tai Chi and also just read a freaking book. Just learn.
it helps.
It does
And also
help.
learn, and also like learn how to write cursive. It changes the brain chemistry so much. If you write cursive, you already have, just to write cursive alone, you have to be in an alpha state. You have to be in about 11 to 14 brainwave cycles just built to write cursive. So it's like learning how to read. It's like right now we're trying to like learn how to run before we can crawl, instead of learning how to crawl before we can run. So it's like we're just like putting kids in front of computer screens at the age of 1.5 and 2. It's like the brain isn't really geared to do that. It's geared, you have to be able to slow down the brain waves to be able to like really understand and encode information.
But to answer your question, yes, so we think they targeted Stephen's family mainly because of their psychic abilities.
Yes.
In our data, we see that they're mostly Caucasians are taken, about 9 out of 10. And for some reason, they are after people with green eyes. About 4 out of 10 people taken have green eyes, and that's a much higher proportion than in our. They make up in the population.
Yeah.
And they take more Rh negative. About 4 out of 10 are Rh negatives, and they take more Basque people. Now, Basques, the Basque population are the highest incident of Rh negative. And we're not really sure if they're taking Basques, therefore the data shows they're more Rh negatives, or they're after Rh negative, therefore they're taking more Basques.
Right.
But the hair of the alien was such a fascinating thing, where the Basque thing came into it again. One hard little kernel of evidence that proves our theory correct is that this is a breakaway population of humans that we're dealing with, and not distant star dwellers, right?
Right, not Pleiadians.
Right. This one man was he was sexually accosted by 2 women in his bed.
Australian guy.
In Australia, and he was paralyzed while they had sex with him.
Mm-hmm.
And
lucky guy.
Yeah. So one of the
Wait to the end of the story.
One of the women, he said she looked like a hybrid being. Like her eyes were way too large, and her features were too pointy. And as she was straddling him, she touched her stomach and pointed to the sky. And then the next morning, he wakes up and he finds a hair in his bed from this woman. She had white hair.
Mm-hmm.
And under a microscope, this hair is clear, which is an unknown human type. There is no such thing as a clear human hair.
Right.
But genetically, this thing tested as human. It was Basque, Gaelic, and this subset of Chinese population that only makes up like 1%. A strange mixture of human genetics, but still human, but a mutated human. We're dealing with mutated humans. And how would they get mutated? Well, living underground for thousands of years might do it, you know, and or
humans are very adaptable. We're actually we're very simple when it comes down to from a genetic standpoint. You know, 4 base pairs. It's not that hard to. We're doing it right now. You know, with CRISPR, we're doing a lot of the same stuff. You know, look where we were 100 years ago compared to where we are now. It's like night and day.
Yeah, it's a massive leap.
And we think they are different. They have bases on other bodies in our solar system. We think they have bases on Mars and the Moon and Phobos. There's a structure on Phobos. So in that way, yes, they're extraterrestrial, but not coming from distant star systems.
Right, exactly.
And you know, that's like the first half of our book. The first half of our book is these theories, and but the second half is more about are aliens involved at all? And we think that they still are, yes, but we have to go back 300,000 years ago when it looks like our species was uplifted genetically. There's actually, looks like our genome has been tampered with in the Broca's brain section.
Neocortex, Jason Ortell talks a lot about that.
Where we've given the power of speech by somebody. Somebody uplifted us to create, from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens.
When you really think about it, you know, for instance, like I talk about this with Leslie frequently, that when you think of, it doesn't matter which language you're talking about. When somebody says tree, doesn't matter whether you're speaking Swahili or whatever. You don't think of how to.
We don't spell it in our head.
How to spell it. The first thing you do is you see a tree, whether it be a baobab tree or a giant sequoia or an oak tree, you see that picture in your head. Right. So the thing is, the way the brain is wired in the human brain is wired in laying down neurochemical pathways that show you a picture. That's why the original languages, the proto-languages, are all basically like drawings or stick figures or whatever it may be, representational. Say, okay, all right, we're representing this animal,
pictorial,
right? Pictorial. Then it became ideographic. Then, you know, that like a written language, like, you know, English language is like 4 or 5 or 6 generations away from the way the brain actually speaks. It's all representational.
That's true for ancient Sumerian as well, which there's a proto-Sumerian that is looks more hieroglyphic like a ancient Egyptian kind of does.
So if you're going to be like building something like the Great Pyramid, you have to be able to communicate and be able to like do blueprints and do drawings and do something. You have to have a game plan. You have to have a design and a pattern, and you can only do that by having a verbal and then a written language.
Right.
You can't just say, unless you're like doing it all telepathically. See, that's the way these, you know, our cousins get around stuff. They don't have to speak 7,000 different languages. They just do it telepathically.
Right.
Because that's how our brains are wired in the first place.
And when we were doing, Stephen studied Tai Chi, which is a moving meditation, and it opens up the chakras and you start to gain some of the abilities that you would if you were doing chakra work, right? Chakra work we started doing when we were together. We got together. And that's, you know, the meditation and the chanting to vibrate the chakras and open them. And the more we did that, the more telepathic we became. So what we think is that telepathy is a human attribute, a human power and trait that has atrophied in us, but has not atrophied in the culture that like live under the ground.
If you've never done a pull-up in your life, you probably will never be able to do a pull-up. It's just like an area of the brain that is atrophied, but it's something that we have.
Right.
You know?
And it points to, like, how can they be telepathic with us? They have the same kind of brain as us. That's how.
Yeah.
And and then Eisenhower is supposed to have made a deal with these people, right? Our government sold us out for a little bit of technology to an absolute alien culture.
No.
That doesn't make any sense. But to share it with other humans that you're sharing the planet with, then
Yeah.
A little bit more sense. Yeah.
And so all this little stuff started to click into place, like an epiphany of understanding once we realized that that's what's going on.
Right.
And
the KISS method.
Yeah. And then we had to look even further back though to see if the alien concept and our history only goes back to the flood. We have nothing before that. We don't have anything written down or
that we know of.
That we know
of.
If
we did, it's gone. Yeah, or hidden.
Forever.
It's because they basically just scraped. The tsunamis just scraped us off the planet, and the few survivors on the surface were just shoved back into the Stone Age.
Yeah, that's another piece of kernel that we found too. That there was a genetic bottleneck that occurred about that time too. That the human population was reduced to maybe less than 10,000 people on the surface.
The poor schmoes that were left on the surface.
So the 8 billion people we have right now have been regenerated from a kind of a small,
like 10,000 individuals.
Genetic pool. So
that's why we're so non-genetically diverse. People were like, "Why aren't we diverse?"
Well, because there was only about 10,000 people left on the Earth at that time, so you do the math on this.
Right, exactly.
And see, it also makes sense that that's about the level of their technology ahead of us, right? Doesn't it seem like it's about 10,000-ish years? Not millions of years, right?
They wouldn't care about us if they were non-corporeal. Why would they care?
Well, that's my next question. Is why do they care about us?
Exactly.
Because a lot of our interests align. When we hear about them getting their message across to like little children or people they communicate with telepathically.
Yeah, like the aerial school incident. Yeah.
Frequently, the message is take better care of the planet, denuclearize.
Overwhelming.
They're very worried about our nukes. Why? Because they live here too. If we blow up the planet, we kill them too.
Yeah, people forget that since 1945, we've had 2,000, at minimum of 2,000 detonations of between nuclear and atomic bombs, either in the sky, subsurface, or in the water. We've had over 2,000 detonations. I mean, don't you think we've already figured out what nuclear weapons do?
Yeah, how much testing do we need, really?
Right, like why are we doing this?
And so we learned at the hearings last summer, the two pilots that were talking, one of them said that these things are following us absolutely every time we go out on maneuvers. These things are there.
They're there.
And so in our book, it's who they are. We've explained that right tonight. But what they really want is for us to denuclearize. That is their top priority. They're very worried about our nukes, and they follow us every time we take them out for test drives.
And/or either reintegrate with us too.
Yeah, we think that may be what the breeding program is all about. I don't think we even went into that, but one out of 10, roughly, women that people that are abducted are women who claim to have been impregnated by the aliens, and then 4 months later they're taken again, and their fetuses are stolen. And this has been documented as, we think, true, because like the women nowadays, as soon as they find out they're pregnant, they go get an ultrasound, right? So it's documented that they're pregnant. Then they go back to their doctor after the fetus is stolen, and they're cleaned out. The womb is like it was never pregnant, and so that, I guess it's like sort of proof, right? Without actually.
Well, there's something going on.
What I mean?
Yeah, something happened.
And when a woman miscarries, all the placenta, everything is not
Everything's
gone,
there,
too,
yeah,
you know. But in this case, that was just like they just took everything with it
And then sometimes they're reintroduced maybe several years later to
to their hybrid
the
offspring,
hybrid.
yeah,
So sometimes they're, but this will happen like sometimes 2, 3, 4 times to
in their lives. All their
the same
children
woman.
stolen
You know,
away. You know,
before it was like considered to be like, you know, oh, is this an error or whatever, or it was a false pregnancy
yeah,
or whatever. But now we have ultrasound, so we can tell definitively. It always seems to
Yeah.
happen about when the fetus is about 5 centimeters in size, about the size of a
Right.
baseball. And it seems to happen that at that particular size or that particular point of development. So yes, we see a commonality here, and it's just not these women aren't just making this stuff up.
and we think we know where they're taking the fetuses in that there's something called the Dulce report. It's a
You probably know about it.
it's a
We were just talking about it the
Yeah,
other
we were
day.
just
yeah.
talking
Yeah,
about the
you know about
base
it.
the other day.
Yeah, so you know about it.
This guy, the security guard at the Dulce base, he went where he wasn't supposed to go, you know, in the lower levels, and he
Like I
saw
would.
all
Oh,
these
yeah.
vats, you know, growing like hybrids and grays in these vats. And so I think that's what happens. They take the fetus at 4 or 5 months, and then they put him in one of these vats and finish growing them
Like
up.
a more
I guess,
advanced
you know.
test tube baby type
Yeah.
thing, you know.
So they're
Do you
using
think they
women as
reintegrate them into humanity?
Sorry, what?
I'm sorry. Do you think they reintegrate them into humanity? Do you like they?
Yes, we think that's what their mission there. See, they can't get what they want by demanding. They haven't got what they want from us that way. So I think they're trying to change us from the inside out. I think this is possible integration. They're using these hybrids to integrate into our society, and with possibly the goal of changing us slowly, or possibly the goal of slowly reintegrating with us.
I think the way I see it is slightly different, but kind of similar. I think that we are an experiment that got out of control. Okay, when they met with Admiral Byrd, they said, you know, we normally do not have anything to do with you barbarians on the surface, but now that you've discovered how to split the atom, that now we have to like get involved. And I think literally the UFOs that have been crashing, I think they literally had to like pull stuff out of mothballs and
Suddenly follow every nuclear weapon on the
I
planet.
think they really don't want to, but they're finding out that, you know, you guys are nuts. You know that, you know, why do you need to keep on, you know, exploding, you know, nuclear weapons? And you see what they're doing with cattle and domesticated, you know, animals. You know, why do they eat so many, you know, cow eyes and cow tongues and cow testicles and cow uteruses
Our theory
and all
on
the blood?
Our theory on that is that when they went underground, maybe they took herds with them, you know, and that these herds are slowly becoming non-viable, and that may be what they need so much Caucasian genetic material for. Is that might be going on with their own population as well. If they've been underground for a long time, maybe they need regular infusions of surface DNA.
And that's why we came up with also like the vampire theory too. How if you look at the vampire mythos, it's almost dead on as far as like the alien abduction. You know, they come in the middle of the night
and they paralyze you.
Paralyze you to take your genetic material, frequently time and time again, and they can change form, or they can change what you remember. They can rewrite your memory. I mean, it's just the same thing. The succubus or the incubus or the vampire.
Interesting.
It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
As far as the hybrid program, we kind of went into it a little bit. Do you think that there's a possibility that they're building a population for when we eventually destroy ourselves to repopulate?
Yeah, one of the things they said to Admiral Byrd was, and this kind of like justifies the abduction phenomenon. He said, what we're going to do is protect your race from annihilation by taking some samples of your race for safekeeping. And that's sounds very familiar. Like that's kind of what they're doing. So we know that they take people and sometimes don't put them back too, right? there's a lot of missing people, especially in Alaska, right?
Oh, especially like
the two
there's
bases, up there.
there's been numerous papers written about how many people disappear just in broad daylight in national parks.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a whole episode on that. And what's funny about that, or similar about that you point out, is that a lot of those people go missing around the cave systems.
Yes,
Yes. Mhm.
that's right.
So in the national parks, isolated, close to caves. And if you watch those cave systems in America, at least, a lot of them do connect.
And these are healthy examples.
Yes.
These are healthy people. They're backpackers,
Oh,
right? They got a
very
pack
healthy
on their
people.
back, and they just
Yeah,
climb.
you want to take healthy stock. You don't
Yeah,
want to take
healthy specimens,
Makes sense.
Then when
That's
we
what
did
we
our
do.
missing 411 episode where people went missing in the national parks, we found a map of the cave systems and then another map of UFO hotspots, and
No
it laid
kidding.
perfectly up on top
They,
of each other.
they line up pretty
Wow.
much.
And what are they doing with them? We've heard stories about them being kept in stasis, like where people are frozen, but they think people look at them and think, I thought that, but it seemed like they were alive, but
Mhm.
they were frozen, and
Mhm.
And a few of them come back like years later.
yeah,
Mhm.
like the
Rumpelstiltskin.
the Rip Van Winkle,
Rip Van Winkle, the other guy.
thing,
Rip
where
Van
he comes back 100 years later, and it's like,
Yeah.
what the hell happened to my village?
It really, really is.
Yeah, the Tuatha Dé Danann.
Yeah, those guys, and
Ireland.
that's another thing. We kept finding more and more and more and more stories about people going underground. Why? Why would you go underground?
Mm.
Well,
It's
a
safer.
colossal, comet about to strike your planet would be a really good reason. And it's a lot of times it's the upper caste of people that go underground. The Druids in England were
The haves and the have-nots.
right. They were the wealthy caste, the science caste, the religious caste, and they're supposed to have gone underground in England. The Tuatha Dé Danann that Steve was just mentioning in Ireland, they were again the scientist class, the upper class, and so it's like the upper class of people 12,850 years ago said, oh crap, we have to build underground bunkers so we can survive. And then we think a lot of these flood myths end the same way too.
Yes.
They talk about God took pity on the people who were starving and had kind of gone back into barbarity and cannibalism after the flood. We weren't doing well as a species on the surface. And they took pity on us, and God took pity on us and sent his emissaries or representatives to help re-civilize the people on the surface. We think this is them.
Like
Yeah. We think they just spotted us practically dying out on the surface and said, these people need a boost,
and
right?
they actually need us too. That's the whole thing.
Right. They need us too.
Definitely, they need us too.
That's what it seems like. Because they seem like they invest a lot of energy in making sure that we're just okay. Like they don't really care how great we're doing. Right. They just need us to be here, not destroying everything.
And not dying out entirely, and not blowing up the whole planet. Yeah. We think they've been playing gods for thousands of years.
Right.
But now they're playing space alien. Now it's like, oh yeah, it's anything to keep us looking up, instead of down under our feet.
Right. That's interesting to think about it that way.
Yeah, I never thought about it like that.
Yes. Keep us looking.
The Wizard of Oz.
Wave the left hand here while the right hand is doing something else.
Don't look
Did
behind
you guys remember the story of Valiant Thor?
Yep.
I love the story of Valiant Thor, yeah.
Once again, a Caucasian human
from Venus
lands in a spaceship, in Virginia, and he said he was from Venus. Okay,
why?
So we know he's not from Venus, right? Nobody's from Venus. I don't think there's a bacterium alive on Venus, right?
Maybe in the clouds.
But maybe. So
Gas.
Why is he telling us he's from Venus? Because he's from under our feet. And they don't
he doesn't want to expose it, so we're got to
Yeah.
look up.
No.
But they were advising the White House, all this time. And we think at some point, of course, our government became aware of them, whether it was with that because of
Ethelbert.
Well, there was a crash, a UFO crash in 41.
Yeah, 1941.
In Missouri.
Cape Girardeau.
And they it didn't hit the media. They managed to keep that one under wraps very well. But there was a crash ship and dead alien bodies, and they took them to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base before eventually setting up Area 52.
51.
I mean 51 and 52, right? Sorry, but what was I saying? You interrupted me.
Oh, the ones kept under wraps.
Oh yes, so we know they became aware of them at least by 41, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we think that they set up the whole Project Blue Book thing to try and keep it under wraps. We think they met with Eisenhower, and in this meeting there was some sort of a treaty about how share your technology and we'll keep your secret for you. And so that and in the book, as you know, because you started it, before we could talk about our theories with the layman, I had to kind of educate the layman quickly. I gave him like a UFO 101 crash course, about
Pun
from
intended.
the 40s to now, and then we could start talking about our theories in chapter.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, we didn't even go into like what Mussolini supposedly in the mid 1930s.
Oh yeah, that's
they
another
covered,
crash. Yeah.
They gave it to the Pope.
And then gave it to the Pope, and then now we have it.
Yeah, Richard Dolan, in his recent book, apparently as far as like confirmed crashes, it's like around about 115 or 117.
Yeah.
That as far as confirmed crashes, that it's pretty staggering.
More proof that they're not millions of years ahead of us.
I was just gonna say, they sound pretty human that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And I think at some point the Nordics, we think the Nordics are in charge, right? Because the meeting with Byrd was with the Nordics, and the meeting with Eisenhower was with the Nordics, right?
And Ariane underneath the ice sheet.
But we think that at some point they discovered this population of humans that was underground the entire 13,000 years, the Greys.
Yeah.
And I think they've been utilizing them as like a worker race.
Like almost like we do with slaves,
And they have no qualms about using genetic manipulation for stuff. Like we have qualms about it, right?
Well,
they don't. They don't have any. They're happy. Like, for instance, let's say they need underwater work done. They don't create scuba gear. They create a race of reptiloids that can work underwater. In other words, they use genetic manipulation just like we would use.
Because it's easy. It's like playing with building. We're doing it now. So why not?
Yeah.
So that's basically our theories in a nutshell. Very nutty show.
Yeah, the second half of the book we haven't talked a lot about, so there's still something out there for you readers to.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot in there actually.
Yeah.
And I love this. This is like my world. This is everything I talk about. It's great to have a conversation with people that are more educated in this than I am. I'm usually the one spewing out the information with people with blank faces, but you have a captive audience in me.
It's so nice to talk to somebody who's heard of this stuff, like I don't have to start from scratch, with all these things. It's wonderful. Thank you.
And you guys did an absolutely fantastic job tying everything together. It really, really lets you step back and kind of just view everything. I mean, the most complete that I've seen it. I've not seen everything that how many things did we just talk about tied together so well? And you really don't jump. You don't jump from this to that. Like, you really put it in order. And
we're not rabbit hole people. Exactly. It's got to make sense.
Thank you so much.
It's actually very, very we both thank you for that, because
it was difficult. I had
imagine
I had millions of snippets of information that I had to somehow cobble into a And
I know what
my solution one morning. I dreamt about it at night.
Actually,
woke up with
jump in here. But one of the last things we decided to do was that I had so many of these things that had happened to me and my family that for like the first 80% of the book, we didn't even entertain putting that stuff in. I said, Leslie, we should probably make this as an introduction as far as like as far as the reason why
Yeah,
we wrote it in the first place.
to give
Instead of
people
just
where
making
we're coming from,
Instead
kind
of
of
making
thing.
it just like a regular UFO book about all this stuff has happened, this is our theory. But we have, nobody can. I've never heard anybody else that's had their coins magnetized in their pocket.
No.
Things like
Yeah.
that. And my, it's like, I have too many important things that have happened, and we didn't even touch upon some of the other things.
Yeah, I wanted to steer people, if it's all right, to our Instagram page,
Oh, absolutely.
because we have a bunch of the family's experiences in this little series I made, the alien abduction series, and other series are all there. And also, if people want to hear any snippets of Stephen's music, we've posted a few of his beautiful playing. It's really quite lovely.
I'll link all that below. I'll put the link to the Amazon for your book. I'll link your Instagram.
Thanks. Oh, I forgot to tell you the handle. It was at leslie.shaw.author, and Leslie is Leslie spelling. And the Facebook is the same handle. And we also have a website, whotheyarebook.com, where we have excerpts and blogs and a link to all the podcasts that we do. So as soon as you guys drop it, we'll spread it all over our social media as far as we can.
Oh, we appreciate it, and we'll spread your book and everything and your socials and everything as well on ours.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate it, and in the future maybe we'll talk again. I'm sure there'll be news.
I hope we
Yeah,
can.
I would love to do a two-parter.
We'd love to. The second half of the book, really.
Yeah.
Other
But this
events.
just hooks the people to get the book.
Yeah, and the next book. Yeah, we'll be ready for it.
This
And
is true.
thanks everyone for tuning in and listening. Appreciate it.
Thank
Right.
you.
Yep. Thank you guys. Talk to you guys later.
All right. Bye.
Very good. Bye-bye.
That was really cool.
Yeah, they're perfect. That was a lot of fun.
Oh man, I just feel like I just talked to like grandma and grandpa about UFOs, and I just felt all.
And they
warm
understood
about
you.
it. Yeah. Just like the blanket of understanding.
All right. Well, everybody, that was an excellent guest episode. I'm glad you guys joined us. Again, we appreciate all your support. We appreciate you being here and listening. If you have topics, questions, if you want to be a guest, Josh, how do you do that?
Email us at ssospodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your stories, anything you want to tell us.
Yep. We have some Halloween stuff we're working on, so get ready for spooky season.
I'm a slut for spooky season.
There is the Lou Alessandro book coming out that we will be talking about soon. And other than that, the rest of you beautiful human beings have a wonderful evening, day, time, whenever you're listening to this.
If you would like to join
We
us as a
appreciate
guest,
you.
suggest a topic,
Bye.
or have a story
Later.
you want us to share, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at ssospodcast@gmail.com for more behind-the-scenes updates and exclusive insights about SSOS. Make sure to follow us on social media, and don't miss out on the fun. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, thank you for listening to the Secret Society of Strangers podcast. This show is an independent production, researched and crafted by our passionate team, but we couldn't do it without all of you. We truly appreciate your support. Embrace the unknown. Farewell, strangers.